Hello everybody. So today I wanted to talk about the decision made by India to change their name to Bharat. Now, I don't believe it's officially been made yet, but it will be made, sounds like. So, is it the right decision? What are their motives for doing it? Why do they want to change their name? And, is that reasonable? First thing to note is, look, any country can change its name at any time. They're allowed to, for any reason. Now, obviously, the individual country will have their own rules, but the international community has no right to tell them you can't change your name if you don't want to. Like we here in Australia or England or USA, we have no right to say, hey India, you've got to stick with me in India. So from that context, they're allowed to change it. Now, the other thing is, so India wanted to change their name to Bharat. Now, Bharat is it's essentially what their name was before England or Great Britain, the British Empire, took over back in, I'm not even sure the year, 1640 or something, when they conquered India and subjugated India to their rule. Now, of course, that's not quite exactly true, because India wasn't really its own country at that time. They were a number of smaller regions called Rajas, and that's why it was easier for the British Empire to take them over. If they'd been one galvanised country, they probably would have been powerful enough to maybe not defeated the British Empire, but at least held them at bay. But because they were separated into, I think it was 1,000 different Rajas, 1,049, they didn't have much chance. And indeed, one of the Rajas, one of the bigger ones, called Hyderabad, actually did hold off the British conquest for a number of years, and they remained independent. Of course, Hyderabad today is part of India. So we're going back not just to immediately before, but quite a long way before, for when it was called Bharat. Now, here we get into a bit of history and whether some people believe it was really proper history. So according to Indian history, India was called Bharat when it was one unified nation. But this is a time period where historians say, no, that period didn't actually really happen. Because according to Indian history, India at one stage conquered most of Europe and most of Asia. And they were all part of what they called the Aryan Empire. Now, you might have heard the term Aryan and thought that was a German empire. Well, according to Adolf Hitler it was. It certainly is, well, at least mentioned a lot of times. But according to Indians, no, that was an Indian empire. That was the great Indian empire at its peak. And when that was the peak, the part of the Aryan Empire that was their capital was called Bharat, which was modern day India. So Bharat is apparently named after some great Indian mythological figure. Not sure if it's a real person. But yeah, so they were basically saying, well, this is our central point. All the rest of the place in India, including in Europe, including Germany, they're all Aryan, but the central part of the Aryan Empire is Bharat. And of course, then they were defeated and shrunk down to Bharat, and then shrunk down into their individual Rajas. And I'm sure there's more history than that to do with India getting bigger and smaller. So essentially today, what we today think of as India is not one country, but 1,049 countries, or 1,049 Rajas. And they have a number of states, but it's not 1,049 states. So even the individual states are actually, in most cases, amalgamations of 20, 50, 100 different Rajas. So even one individual state within India is actually effectively about 100 countries in some cases, or 10 countries. Only really Hyderabad was one Raj, that was one country, but even then, I'd have to check. There's every chance that they were separate countries as well. So we could easily divide India into much smaller pieces, and it wouldn't be anywhere near as big. So that's why they've got Bharat. Bharat is essentially the USA. Like if you think of the United States of America as being essentially a number of different countries, but all flying one country's banner. And that's really how USA works. It doesn't really operate as one country, it operates as think it's 52 countries or 52 states, because each individual state is effectively its own country. That's very different to how most countries work. And India is similar. So India operates in a lot of ways as if it's a lot of separate countries, and this probably explains why they're so insular. Well, they're not really aware of the world outside of India, or perhaps they're aware of Pakistan and Bangladesh and vaguely Sri Lanka, but that's pretty much it. Maybe Nepal, pretty much it. And then big countries like, obviously they know about USA and China, well, China's next to them, but they know about USA. They're aware of Russia, and that's pretty much it. And they don't really get into any depth about the other countries, because the world revolves around India as far as India is concerned. So very insular. So look, they're not the only country that's insular. USA is obviously pretty insular. China's pretty insular. North Korea probably shouldn't be, but they're pretty insular too. So it's not really a surprise that India aren't really aware of the world around them, outside of their own immediate sphere of influence. So people in smaller countries like Australia, we're much more aware of the world around us. Well, it depends on the individual person, of course, as to how aware they are. So anyway, going back to this, so Bharat is sort of a bit of a funny word, because it implies that the Aryan Empire was real and that it was based on India. Now, according to Adolf Hitler, we all know, we've probably all heard, oh, Aryan, that was what the Nazi Germans called themselves. Well, according to India, Germans are Aryan. And they'd say, well, they were Aryan. They are Aryan. In fact, all of what some people call the white race are Aryans, and they're based on India. So Indians call themselves white. It might surprise you, because their skin is clearly not white. It's quite a lot darker. But if you get an Indian, and we had this in America, different points, they said, all right, put your race on there. Are you African, Asian, or white? And the Indians would get confused and say, well, we're white. They'd say, look, if you want to put down brown, because they call themselves brown, then they'd put brown. But if you're going to split it into those three denominations, well, they're not Asian, they're not African, so they get to click white, and they do click white. And then people are like, and they'll go, hey, you're not white. They say, well, I consider myself white. Indians consider themselves to be white. That might surprise a lot of people, but they do. Of course, Chinese consider themselves to be white too, but that's a different sort of white. They're like Asian white, porcelain. So, but the thing is, so basically Indians say, well, Indians and Germans are the same racial group, but Indians have a bit of a tan. Or, put another way, Germans have their skin's a bit bleached white. They're the same race, and if you look at them physically, same facial features, same everything. So, but Adolf Hitler lied, perverted history and all that, and confused a lot of people by saying, oh yeah, the Aryan Empire was based in Germany. It wasn't. It's based in India. Now, then you got the Caucasian. So some people say Caucasian is the same race as Aryan, and I tend to agree. But Caucasian was the Slavic word for Aryan, if you like. So the Slavs said, well, okay, because Slavs are white, obviously, and they say, well, where's the boundary between Slavs and non-Slavs? And they say, well, the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia, and by Georgia I mean the country of Georgia, which is close to Russia, as opposed to the American state of Georgia. Americans do get confused sometimes. So, because they're very insular in USA. They're like, Georgia? No, that's our state. So yeah, well, there's also a country. So yeah, so that's the border. So anyone that's west of the Caucasus Mountains, they're Caucasian. They're white. And of course India have a different way of saying it. They say, well, anyone who's from India or anywhere in the Indian Empire, the Aryan Empire, is Aryan. So they say anyone in Germany, anyone in large sections of Asia, not all of Asia, but up to the edges of the Aryan Empire, they're all Aryan. And they say, well, okay, the ones in the Asian part of Arya had brown skin, and the ones in the European part of Asia had... I thought I pressed record again there. But anyway, so I think Bharat deals with a lot of these issues. And I think they should be called Arya. And I know that's that character out of Game of Thrones, but it was also the name of India before it was Bharat. And I think that would deal with a lot of the things, because Adolf Hitler lied a lot about racial ideals. I mean, he was saying, oh yeah, white supremacy, blah blah blah, but in reality Arya was India, and the Indians were saying, well, Dravidian is the brown Indians, the Asian Aryans, and they had another name for the European Aryans, which I'm not aware of, so I'm not going to just say the wrong thing. Yeah, so, and of course, you know, you want to deal with that, but yeah, I think Arya would be a better name, but Bharat is a good name for now, and perhaps eventually they can call themselves Arya further down the track. But I think at the moment, if they call themselves Arya, people say, "Oh, you mean Germany?" No. Oh, you mean that girl out of Game of Thrones? No. Like Maisie Williams' character. You know, no one. Yeah, they'd be saying things like that. But you know, Bharat is a good name. And yeah, look, I mean, any country can change their name. I think there's a few countries going around that should change their name, but that's one that's probably, in a lot of ways, quite important. And I think in some ways, like outside of India, it does deal with a bit of racism. I think their reason for it is completely wrong, because I don't think England was so evil as to call themselves India. It just mean land of the Hindus. But anyway, that's it for me. Bye bye now.